Hey guys, Andy here. Now, there are some people still left that prefer the smaller device over the general trend of the 5-inch and above mobile phones. There's not actually a lot of options for these people these days. Even Nexus's smaller device, the 5X, was, it's not that much smaller than my Note 5. So I know, my brother's one of these that prefer smaller devices, but I think he's coping with the 5X. But I do know of others that have said, no, the 5X is just too big. They prefer the Nexus 5, for example, was a reasonable size for them, and above that just isn't manageable. So I was quite interested when Clove.co.uk offered me the use of the Sony Xperia Z5 Compact. Looking at the specs, it should be basically sort of a top-end flagship device, but in a smaller, one-hand manageable size. So I was really quite interested. Add to that, Sony's cameras and screens are often, very highly talked about. So I've not used a Sony for a little while, I don't think. So yeah, I was more than happy to get hold of it and have a play. If we talk about the design first of all, I think it's quite an interesting design. It's quite a stylish looking design. It's quite a simple design. I like the little bits like Xperia on the edge there. Do you see that? It is IP68 waterproof, which is why we've got kind of the little flap there. I won't bother pulling it off. The fingerprint sensor, it has a fingerprint sensor, is actually on the power button, which I quite like. So you press it and you're holding it, and I felt a little vibration and then it goes. If I do it with a thing that's not, but then generally I found it works very well. It's quite quick. The only problems, I suppose, when your device is on the side on a table or something. So actually that worked, you see, but there were times you don't maybe get the full. Well, it's going to work every time now. So there, it's not. There are times when you don't get enough, and there again. Oh, so now it's on a. There we go. When it's on a table, you kind of reach in and press the power on it, and you don't get enough thumb on it, perhaps. But generally, on the whole, it was pretty reliable if you got a decent amount of a registered finger onto the power button. Other parts of the design, so power button there, as we've just been talking about, and then down below, look, dedicated camera button, which generally I like the idea of, but actually one thing I've realised is I think you're more likely to get camera shake if you're using that. As you press it, it's really hard not to move the camera when you press it. So actually, I'm not so sure. I used to think I was always in favour of dedicated camera buttons, but I'm not sure now. Actually, maybe it's not actually as good a thing as we imagine. That as well, I just tend to forget to use it because I'm not used to having one. Then just above the dedicated power button is a volume rocker. It's one of the smallest volume rockers that you're going to see, really. And actually, for me, it's a bit low. It's kind of an odd position to come down there. It's almost a bit awkward, a bit uncomfortable to adjust. So I'm not a massive fan of that. Headphone jack on the top and micro USB charging points on the bottom. We do have NFC, as you can see from the little logo there. Again, quite a sort of classy, I think, just looking rear. We have the camera up in the top corner there, which is 23 megapixel. We'll talk about later. No wireless charging, might be worth mentioning at this point. So yeah, all round, it's a little bit slippy, possibly, because it's quite a smooth device. But obviously, when it's this small, it won't be too bad to put a case on. It doesn't make it huge by any means. I quite like the speakers are barely visible. If you've seen my unboxing, you might have had a giggle at me because I was saying, "Well, is that the speaker? Where's the speaker?" But actually, there's a tiny, thin slit top and bottom, and it is dual front-facing speakers, which actually sound very good. Although they surprisingly didn't score as high as I thought they might do on my tests, but they do sound very good. There is also a notification LED. I don't think I've got any notifications at the moment. I don't know if you can see it just in that corner. Probably not, but it flashes up there should you have any notifications. The device is 138 grams and 8.9 millimeters thick, which actually isn't, both of those are a bit more than you might have expected. Both of the Z5's big brothers, the sort of regular Z5 and the Premium, are thinner than that. But I suppose when you're compacting it all into a smaller thing, you almost can't go a bit deeper because you need to fit everything in still. The internals are generally quite impressive. I mean, it is really supposed to be a flagship, just compact version of one. So that's the Snapdragon 810 chipset. It's got the dual quad-core processor, 1.5 gigahertz and 2 gigahertz, the A53 and the A57, respectively, which I believe are the same across the whole Z5 range, no matter which one you're buying, as is the Adreno 430. So all those three things are the same across all of the Z5s. The one thing where possibly this one is let down slightly, it only has 2 gig of RAM, whereas its bigger brothers both have 3 gig. This comes in 32 gig storage. I think that's the only size it comes in. The screen itself is 4.6 inches and it's 720 by 1280, 323 pixels per inch. Now, flagship-wise, in this modern day, that's not a lot. So a lot of them are clocking up over 500, but at the same time, actually, I think it looks great. I don't know how well you can see. The viewing angles are pretty immense. The colours are strong. I mean, again, it's a Sony screen. You'd expect a good screen, I suppose, but I just think it really is. And to me, it sort of shows that it's not so much about the pixels per inch; it's just about the quality of the screen, I think. And I think it's a fantastic screen. It really does look nice. On all of the Z5 range, they only have, well, it's called scratch-resistant glass. I assume it's Sony's own thing rather than the Gorilla Glass that most other devices have at the moment. I'm not prepared to test it. It's not my device. I don't really want to go scratching keys on it or anything. But I can only assume that, like I say, it's Sony's version and that it would be sufficient for whatever you might need. Also, it's LCD. It's IPS LCD. Now, again, I think it looks great, but the only problem for me with LCD screens, I've kind of, in the last month or so, I've basically taken away my bedside clock, and I use, maybe I uninstalled, oh no, there it is, dock clock. Go away. Now, you won't actually be able to see it, probably, because it's so dim. With the light, when the lights are all off, there you go, I tap it and it appears. When the lights are all off, it's still, on an AMOLED screen, you can just see the time, and that's kind of all you can see, really. But on an LCD screen, even the blacks glow, basically. It's still backlit, they're still lit up, even though it's a black screen. And I just couldn't use this device for that purpose. Not a major problem, but just something to be aware of, I suppose. The AMOLED screens generally have better blacks. If we move on to talk about the camera, so I mentioned it's 23 megapixel on the back, and it's 5 megapixel on the front. Now, fronts these days are often more than 5, basically. I suppose quite often they go to 8. I suppose there are a fair few devices that have just 5 on the front. The front-facing camera, I thought actually was pretty good. It seemed to have pretty good detail. Seemed to cope quite well with exposure changes. The front-facing camera, not too bad at all. Now, the rear-facing camera, I was a little disappointed by. So, I guess the detail in a lot of the actual stills was generally pretty good. But again, they look slightly overexposed. I felt in quite a few situations the colours seem a little bit washed out, especially when I did my video comparisons. I thought the difference was quite clear. Also, in low light film and video, there was an odd blue hue, which really I thought made it look really quite poor. So, all in all, I was a little disappointed, but I don't know, watch some of my other videos. I've shown you some examples here. I guess that's for you to make your own decision. But and maybe I've been spoilt by the Note 5 and actually now the Nexus 6P. We both have fantastic cameras. But I just expected a little bit more from a Sony 23 megapixel camera. The software on the device is Android 5.1.1. There we go. It's still, to me, much the same as pretty much all Sony devices. It's not massively far from stock these days. Things that annoy me, let's say I want to put Beyond Pod on my home screen. I have to go up to the top still, and I don't know, to me that just seems very weird. I don't quite know why they persist in doing it that way. But they do. But all in all, it's not too bad. It's relatively smooth, though I'd noticed some lag a couple of times when using the device. Nothing too horrific. The Sony software that comes with it, again, much the same as has been before. LifeLog there, look. Xperia, Lounge. Honestly, I didn't particularly go into many of them much. I've been using the music player, PlayStation Network. So all the usual bits, I think, that you see. Most of them are removable. So this is a bit iOS, really, which maybe is perhaps why I don't like it. So you hold down, you get the crosses. So the LifeLog, I believe, you want to install this app? Yes. And it's gone. So that was the built-in software. News from look. So a lot of it. I mean, I already installed Kobo books as well. That was something that was on here. So I like that. I give them credit for that. You can remove quite a lot of what you might consider the bloat. Privilege Plus is another. So there's quite a bit of software on there that comes pre-installed, but you can remove most of it. So you've got to give them credit for that, I believe. If more manufacturers should do that, in my opinion. Let's talk about the battery. It's a 2,700 mAh non-removable Li-ion battery. There's no Qi charging, so no wireless charging, but it does have Quick Charge 2.0 through the micro USB. Now, 2,700 mAh to me sounds quite a lot for a 4.6-inch screen, but actually I was surprised how poor the battery lasted. In my usual test, crank the brightness to full, play my 37-minute video, drop it down to lowest possible, play it again. It went down to 84% in the sort of hour and a half that takes, or less than an hour and a half, hour and a quarter maybe. 84% is one of the lowest scores I've ever had. I think my Moto G 3rd Gen scored 82, and I think my Nexus 5 scored about 82 or 81. But apart from that, that's one of the lowest scores I've ever had. It lasted me the day, don't get me wrong. When I got home from work and I put it on charge at the end of the night, it's probably at 30%, 29%. So it's not necessarily an issue. I just expected, when I read that it had 2,700 mAh and only a 4.6-inch screen, I thought, wow, I bet that probably lasts 2 days. And it doesn't. So I was just a little bit surprised and disappointed by that. Like I say, maybe not a massive issue, just I expected more. One thing I've started mentioning in my reviews is just the price. And again, as I got this one from clove.co.uk, I will use them as the benchmark, and they've got it there for £430, which doesn't seem a bad price. It's not your top-end device price. So whilst obviously it's trying to pack in top-end specs, you're not paying that. And when I say top-end price, a lot of them these days, if you're buying SIM-free, are going to be $600. Okay, the Nexus device you can get for $450. You might argue some parts aren't top end, but most of it is actually. That's just I think a good purchase. Some people still say it's too expensive. Let's not get into that. So 430, it is kind of low end of top end, if that makes sense, or top end of mid range. Let me know in the comments which way you would place a £430 device. So it's a reasonable price. Maybe you find it cheaper elsewhere. I don't know. I would recommend you go and have a look at Clove just because of their service. And that they're a good company to deal with. You'll have no problems. So all in all, my conclusions of the device. I like the fingerprint sensor. Actually, that works really well on the power button. I think more companies might start to do that. The speakers sound fantastic. So for me, that's quite important. Some people won't give two hoots, but I do listen to my podcasts. Actually, when I'm on the phone, quite a lot of the time I use the speakers and just leave it on my desk. And they sound really good. Not as loud as the 6P or even my Note 5 or a lot of other devices, but the actual quality, really very good. I think the screen looks great. I don't mind too much about the LCD. It does look a very good screen. For me, the device itself is too small. It feels almost a little fiddly thing. I've got used to my big sort of 5.7-inch devices, so for me it's too small. But there aren't that many devices sub 5 inches that fit the bill really. Are still sort of highly spec'd. So that, I'm not going to say that's a negative point. It's just not suitable for me. The negative points though for me are the battery and the camera. Two of the most important things on a device to a lot of people, myself included. And it was really quite disappointing. Again, neither of them an issue, neither of them actually bad. If you look at the stills, no one's going to say, ugh, that's a horrible camera. But some of the video, they might be a bit, not so good. And especially if it's the same camera units that's on the Z5, I'm quite surprised. On the main, it's Big Brother. Once or twice I noticed some lag. It was noticeable, but only once or twice. not a massive big issue. So all in all, I suppose it's down to if this is the size you need, really. If you can't cope with the bigger devices, then this could well be the way to go. Generally, it's a good, well-rounded device. Its flaws aren't horrifically bad. They're just not great. And all in all, I think for £430, it's probably not a bad purchase. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. My name's Andy. I'll catch you all again soon.